Hey, Shabbat Shalom Mishpocha. Welcome to another edition of Torah Tidbits. This is actually a supplemental Torah Tidbits to the current Torah portion, number 44, which is Devarim. And I would like to discuss a little more about chapter 2 of Deuteronomy. Some things that I was kind of doing in my personal studies, and it just jumped out, so I decided to get on YouTube and share it with you. But there's many who argue that the Old Testament God is a bloodthirsty and wrathful God. And you have the atheists and the agnostics and the human rights activists who, say that God was just the Old Testament was just a bloody God, and he was bloodthirsty, and it was all about killing, slaughtering, and conquering. And in my past vlogs, I brought out the argument that God used Israel as a scourge for judgment. They were usually on the receiving end of the judgment many times. You see, during the Babylonian and Assyrian captivities, and when they sinned and broke Torah, they were, conquered or persecuted or harassed by the nations around them. But the nations, the Canaanite nations that occupied the Promised Land, they were ripe for judgment. They were pagan to the core. They were sacrificing their children. There was rampant sexual immorality, and it was almost like in the days of Noah, so to speak. So, as Israel passed through, God had already given these nations their chance to repent, and they chose not to. So they were wiped out or booted out by Israel. Now, the interesting thing, here is where fairness, justice, and mercy comes in. As Bnei Israel is entering into the territory of the Ammonites and the children of Esau, God says, you're going to pass through this land. Keep your swords in your sheath because you're not going to need them. Just buy your food and water and keep on the trail and just keep trucking through, because I've given Mount Seir for the children of Esau. That's their inheritance. I gave this land to, this people. Now, these were distant relatives, cousins, so to speak, of Israel. And it's funny, not funny as in ha-ha, but ironic that there's a little bit of history given, especially to, the children of Esau. I said Ammon, I meant Moab, I'm sorry. But the children of Esau and Moab, how when they entered this land, they were giants in the land just as they were in Canaan. And those giants had to be eradicated and ousted out before Esau and Moab was able to settle in the land that God gave them for an inheritance. So every people group on earth have their own inheritance in some sort of land that's God given to them. And Israel, the borders of the Promised Land, which Israel does not occupy at this time, they only occupy a small strip of land about the size of the state of New Jersey. Whereas the dimensions mentioned in the Torah of the Promised Land are great and vast, and Israel doesn't even come close to owning that or occupying that right now. But when Mashiach returns, it'll all happen. Anyway, Yahweh told Israel to don't bother Esau and Moab, but just to keep going. But that, how Esau and Moab have their inheritance, and they had to boot out the giants. Now, the giants, according to, if I'm not mistaken, Genesis chapter 6, is a hybrid of, the fallen angelic race cohabitating with human women and producing this offspring that is technically called the Nephilim, or the Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. And there were several different tribes or races spawn off from these giants, and some of them are named. They're the Anakim or the Emim or the Horim. They go by different names, but they were all giants and all these fallen angelic human hybrids nonetheless. So they were not truly human. So they of all creatures had to be expelled from the land. So just as Esau and Moab had to fight their giants, Israel had to take the Promised Land and take their giants too, to be able to rightfully occupy and own the land that they have. Now, it seems to me that this chapter would be very good to go more deeper in, and produces many great arguments and points to shut up the Palestinians propaganda and all this other propaganda that says, well, you have to have the Palestinians own their own land. Now listen, the Palestinians, the root word of that is the Philistines. The Philistines are extinct. They no longer exist. The Palestinians today adopted that name to call themselves Palestinians because the British called that land that they occupied Palestine. Now, these people who call themselves Palestinians from Arab descent do not originate in that part of the land. Some of them were born and raised there, yeah, don't get me wrong, but the majority of them, whom Yasser Arafat had behind him, that produced the Palestinian people, or the PLO, was people from Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, all these other Arab nations. And when Israel came in the 40s and produced the state of Israel, they said, look, you can live peaceably among us and we can cohabitate, or you can go back to your own, to the country of your origin, where your family came from. But the funny thing is, those nations would not have them back. They did not accept them back, so they were forced to stay there, and yet they were staying there, but yet didn't want to cohabitate peacefully with Israel, and therefore, boom, the Palestinian and Israeli conflict, began. But there's giants today. There's giants today that are in the land. And, they also mention how Israel defeated Sihon, who was a king, and Og, who was the last king of the giants. And the Sihon and Og today that we must fight is fear and ignorance. That's the greatest tools of Hasatan, the greatest kings that need to be defeated today is fear and ignorance. Now the giants that occupy the land today, the Anakim means giants. Okay? Simply just means giants. And the Emim means the frightful ones. The Horim means the high and noble ones. That is the origin of their names. So, the Anakim today is anti-Semitism. Push the Jews into the sea, kill all Jews. The giant is anti-Semitism. The Emim, or the fearful ones, is like the Holocaust, the actual persecution of the Jewish people today. We can liken it unto that. And the Horim, or the high and noble ones, are the UN, who basically says, yes or no to the peoples of the world, that, well, yes, you're just in your argument, you're just in your argument, you're just in your fight, you're unfair in your fight, you need to stop this, you need to do this. They're the ones who are telling the world what to do, is the UN. So, what authority do they have when it comes to the scriptures, when it comes to, the Torah and the autonomy of the people mentioned in the Torah? But anyways, those are the kings and the giants that we must fight today until Mashiach returns and we can have our land. Now the Brit Chadasha talks about verses, I think it's in Ephesians, where it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and things in high places. It's what I've just been talking about. 2 Corinthians 10, 4 through 6 talk about, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations of every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of Mashiach, or the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Messiah. And one day, we will have the land of promise. Miracles will happen again when Mashiach returns. The Red Sea, there will be a new Red Sea that will be parted. The Red Sea is the blood that will reach up to the bridle of the horses, that Yahweh is going to split, that Yeshua is going to split with the sword that comes out of his mouth, and the enemies will be defeated, and there will be peace in the land and peace in the world, forevermore. The taking of the land still has to take place. It's still going to happen, and Yeshua is going to be there to back us up, and it's going to be our help. The Red Sea will part once more, but this time it'll be a sea of blood, and it'll be the blood of our enemies. I do not rejoice in that fact, per se, because the Torah says not to rejoice in the defeat of our enemies, lest Yahweh sees our joy in this and turn on us, because it's human life, it's His creations nonetheless. Yahweh does not take joy in the death of His creations. So anyway, I'm running out of time here, so I'll just go ahead and cut it off and end it now. So hope you enjoyed the supplemental portion. Shalom, Shavua Tov. Catch you next time. Love you guys. You're in my thoughts, my prayers. Bye-bye.